let's get started. First of all, I think speaking for Meredith and Nicole and I, we're incredibly excited to talk about flexible funding and general operating grants for our deserving nonprofits. I want to thank you for spending some time with us today to learn a little bit about the grant making process for this particular grant mechanism, and hopeful that we can answer any questions that folks have. We have a rather kind of robust presentation to go through, talk about some of the things that we're thinking about for this year's flexible funding round, and then we'll open up for questions for everyone near the end. I'm going to go ahead and share our screen here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Meredith Lewis. I'm the Director of Community Impact and Partnerships.
Again, Jeff Markham, a Program Officer in the Community Impact and Partnerships team.
Hi, I'm Nicole Borden. I work on our Valley Creates initiative, which is our work to support the arts.
And our colleague, Margaret Everett, is not here just yet. Hopefully she'll drop in soon. So I guess we want to talk a little bit about this type of funding that we're offering in this particular round, which we call flexible funding. These are general operating grants for nonprofits, which folks can use in any way that they see fit. And the rationale for that is because we really want to be in relationship with organizations based on their mission, based on their values, and based on their goals. This type of funding is relatively new to the foundation in alignment with a trust-based philosophy, understanding that nonprofits are experts in their fields and understand the pressing needs for nonprofits and for the participants in any of your organizations or programming. It's really important for us to put you forward as the as the leaders that you are, and allow folks to spend the funds in a way that is most equitable and is in most in alignment with the goals for your organization. So how do we do this? Since we're not doing programmatic grants where we kind of put together goals for organizations that we want to see, we are looking for organizations that are in alignment with the strategic priority areas for the Community Foundation. And these are the 4 listed here: diversity, equity, and inclusion, and workplace and institutions, starting with our own, a strong start for children. So thinking about high quality early education and care. Access to affordable post-secondary education and training, and thinking about pathways to completion. Through a lot of that happens in our scholarship, but in thinking about nonprofits, who are the organizations that are training our workforce in the Valley? And of course, our Valley Creates work, which is to grow a vibrant ecosystem of arts and creativity in our region.
So over time, taking inspiration from these strategic priorities, we've had to work as a team with our volunteers, with voices from the community, to really figure out what that looks like in grant making. And I would say this is the #1 question that we get in flexible funding and that we will continue to get, which is, what does this mean? So basically it means that 75% of the grants that will be awarded in this round will be to organizations whose primary mission is in one of these areas. And to really explain that, let's say you are a healthcare-based organization that has an arts program. Because this is general operating support, you can truly use it however you want to. If you use that in a program that is not related to the arts, that is okay for the stipulation of the grant, but that does not follow our strategic priorities when we think about trying to make an impact in these areas. And so for us, we are looking primarily to fund organizations whose mission is in that area. If you're an arts-based organization and we end up funding, the funding goes to cover your air conditioning bill because it's a crazy hot summer, that's still advancing the mission of being an arts organization that's open. But that may not be advancing in our strategic priority areas if you're an organization whose mission is in another area. So that's 75% of our funds. We will just look at your mission. We primarily do this, and you'll see in the application, we both ask for your formal mission statement. We ask you to describe who you are, what you do, how someone in the community might be familiar with your work. How would you explain it to someone who's not familiar with your work? we'll also look at all of the supporting information. 25% of the total grants and grant funds will go to organizations whose mission is outside of that work. That has to deal in part with the funds that we steward here also have some grant restrictions. So we do need to make some grants in some areas outside of our strategic focus areas. Funds have been given to the Community Foundation over the past 30 odd years of our existence. We also recognize that there are organizations in the area that contribute to our nonprofit ecosystem. And this is a new strategy for us. And so we've been easing into it. But so that is the difference of kind of the 75% and the 25%. It is about your mission. You can tell us about and should tell us about some of the amazing work that you do that touches on those areas. But if you are a healthcare organization, we know that your mission is in healthcare. And if you are someone who is working on youth services, we know that your mission is in youth services. You do not need to make a case that you do something that is not on your mission. We will look at that. And so be rest assured that that is something that we do. If we are confused, and that has happened, we are only human beings. We will sometimes reach out to you and say, hey, we need to understand a little bit more about your organization.
Yeah.
It actually wasn't apparent in the application, but we are really looking at your mission as a driving factor in whether or not you're going to fall into that 75% or potentially that 25%.
Yeah, and a clarification on the
And I should say, sorry, it says 20 on the slide. It's somewhere between 20 and 25.
right there, and also just thinking about the funding areas, the other three areas in terms of early education and care, high education and training for workforce development, and Valley Creates in the arts sector, are all pretty kind of simple to understand. You know, if an organization falls into that category, one does. But thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how does that manifest in the way that we fund, we've moved towards thinking about organizations that are involved in systematic, undoing systemic and structural racism and doing real racial justice work. And so organizations where that is at the fore, and many organizations, that's a lens through which you look at the work, which is incredibly important. But there are organizations that is the stated mission of the organization, and those groups would fall into that particular category.
Yeah. You can always reach out to us. We'll share multiple times through this presentation how to connect with our staff to ask individual questions. But on the website for flexible funding, you'll also see that we expanded on this. I know in the age of internet, taking time and reading, sometimes I will be the first to admit it, is hard, but we did expand a little bit on each one of these 4 areas and the types of organizations we anticipate funding. And so if you're confused about any of those areas, really encourage you to head to the website, read those paragraphs, and then again, still happy to answer questions, but we worked very hard to try to articulate the types of organizations that we anticipate funding under these 4 bucket areas.
Yeah, and just a shout out to our communications staff and team who put that together. I think we were able to capture what Meredith is talking about on that website. I think almost everything there will kind of give folks an idea of what exactly we're looking for. And obviously, if there's any clarifying questions or needs or concerns of anyone, please reach out to us directly.
So just a little bit about eligibility. We, as a community foundation, the way that we're structured, we fund 501c3 organizations. We can also fund organizations that are fiscally sponsored by a 501c3. If you have any complicating factors with your fiscal sponsor, just reach out to us right now. Let us know. We want to make this possible. There's some additional documentation that we require. We have some flexibility around it. If it is helpful for your fiscal sponsor to speak to us directly, we are also more than happy. And the odds are we might have already spoken to them because many of them sponsor more than one organization. We're looking for organizations that benefits the residents of Franklin, Hampton, and Hampshire County. That is how we are structured. That is our biggest restriction on grants. Many of you work for organizations that support people outside those county lines because we know charitable needs don't understand county lines and geography like that. What we tell people is that if your organization is based outside of this area, we're going to start to look for some factors that help figure out how you're substantially benefiting residents of this region. That might include, but certainly isn't limited to, do you have an office or staff in this region? Do you have a specific program that is dedicated to the residents of this region? We will ask for percentages of how many, what percentage of the population that you serve are in our 3 counties. For larger organizations, that percentage can be very small, and that can still be a pretty substantial financial investment. We also include a box on the application for you to tell a little bit more about this and about that connection. But unlike family foundations, corporate foundations, other private foundations, community foundations are really place-based funders. And so we know that some organizations are not place-based. We also know that y'all are all virtual right now, and I'm betting many of you may not be sitting in Western Mass. You don't need to be in our counties to do that type of work, but place-based funders are still very much locally focused, where there's some other amazing funders that take regional, national, and sector-wide approaches. There are a couple of restrictions. We don't fund to endowments. Our money goes very quickly when we do that. We can't make grants to individuals. We don't fund sectarian or religious organizations unless it's a fiscal sponsor, a program that benefits the wider public. We don't do higher education scholarships because we have another whole separate program that does that, which opens up in January, and we don't fund academic research. What you'll notice for those of you that are regular Community Foundation followers is that we used to talk about advocacy and legislation. We've taken off that restriction. The IRS still has a restriction against lobbying, but there's a lot that you can do in administrative advocacy work. We believe that's necessary to change the policies that create systems of inequity in our community. And we know increasingly that you are doing that work. And so it is your responsibility legally to understand what you can and can't do. We have resources about that. We're happy to help you, but we love it when organizations are doing work that helps advocate for their causes in a way that nonprofits can. We believe is necessary for change. And so we took off all of that language from all of our documentation this year, in large part to some of the feedback that you have given us. So thank you.
So quickly, this is also a tool that's on our website. And what we're really trying to do is, as Meredith noted before, is thinking about organizationally how we're going to be funding during this grant period. Of course, we're going to fund 20 to 25% of organizations that are outside the focus area, but we do want folks to think about eligibility and their ability to determine the strength of their application based on just these general factors. Not, of course, talking about the strength of the application itself, but just how you position yourself as an organization. So there's really two questions to determine eligibility. Are you a 501c3 tax-exempt organization? Or are you fiscally sponsored by one? Pretty simple. We cannot grant to organizations that are not nonprofit organizations. And do you engage or operate with residents of Franklin, Hampden, and Hampshire County? Those are the two eligibility requirements. If you don't meet those, then you should not apply, and you will not be funded. But anything outside of that, you can apply. Now, when we think about like what is the strength of your application look like, does your organization have a track record of successful programs or initiatives? Does your organization have a clear mission of goals aligned with the strategic focus areas that we've outlined before? And if you are in those focus areas as an applicant, you are in a place to be funded. The folks who are outside of that, outside of those focus areas, it is going to be incredibly competitive. And it was competitive within the focus areas as well last year. And the anticipation is that with the amount of need in our communities, and you all know better than anyone, that we will have a fair amount of applications for flexible funding. One, because there is incredible need, but also because the nature of the funding is general operating, and that is incredibly appealing to nonprofit organizations. Can you provide financial statements, including an annual budget? And do you have an organization, a board of directors or advisory committee as a part of your organization? And we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics related to those within the application.
Yeah. So basically, if you're answering no to all those questions at the bottom, it does not mean that you cannot apply. It means that your chances will be very, very slim. If you are answering no to one of those questions, chances are going to be slimmer than yes. People ask me, should I apply, especially if I'm outside the focus area? We try to make our application pretty straightforward. There are about 3 or 4 substantial questions. The rest are basic demographic information, which we hope you have available to you pretty quickly. You might be applying for other grants and you say, okay, you know what, like it's not that big of a deal to put in another grant application. You might have a dedicated grant writer. then I generally say like, great, then if it's not going to be a difficult grant application, there might be there's a chance that you will be funded. And it also puts you on the radar of us, right? We understand what your goals are for next year. So if we hear about another capacity opportunity, if we hear about an organization that might be ripe for partnership, if we hear about another donor in our network, we can kind of help with that. If you're an organization that doesn't have grant writing resources, if this feels challenging, if you say, I just don't like the odds, I have better things to do with my time, like fulfill my mission, we also totally understand that. And there are other ways to connect with us. At the end of the day, it has to be kind of a capacity decision on your part. And again, it really comes back to your mission. We will also highlight as we go through the application, the questions that we look at for evaluation. So you can say, hey, we're not so strong in that area, or we're actually particularly strong in that area to help you figure out what your application looks like. We'll go through those specific questions. But at the end of the day, if you answer yes to the top two questions, you can apply. It is simply a matter of bandwidth. All of us sitting in this room at the Community Foundation have been where you've sat. We have done the frustrating job of writing grant applications, not knowing if they'll be funded. We have a lot of empathy, and we also recognize that we now sit on the other side, and it is a really challenging decision to decide how you spend your time, fundraising versus programmatic work.
Yeah, I mean, we value time in a real way. And another thing that I think Meredith alluded to, and I want to be more concrete around, is that there is value in applying, even if you don't feel like you're necessarily, but if you're strong in some of the areas that we talk about in the application, and it's an opportunity for us, if we're not aware of your organization, if we're not in real relationship at this point, it may find us a place where we can find other opportunities to connect you to. There are several meetings I had with folks who weren't funded last year that led to opportunities, not necessarily with the foundation in terms of funding, but maybe in terms of capacity building opportunities or other funders that we're aware of.
Great. So we're going to show you just a little bit about how to get into our system. There has been so much staff turnover in the past 3 years, Great Resignation, COVID, life. If you think your organization has applied to us in the past 3 years, or you're not sure, just shoot a quick email to grants@communityfoundation.org. If your organization already has an account, it is so much more preferable for us to add you to that account rather than for you to create a new one. Why? First, you'll get access to those grants that someone wrote before you that you've never seen and you'd like to know what they look like. Second, it's the odds are that most of your organization information is the same, and so you're not going to be recreating that. It also helps in our system to not have duplicates. So if you have any questions, just shoot a note to grants. You will probably get myself or Margaret. We'll just we can look it up. It takes us 5 seconds. We'll shoot a note and we say, yes, you have an account. Here are the people that are still there. Do you want us to remove them? Do you want us to add you? You might realize your colleague has access and you didn't know that. And if it's not in there, we'll direct you to hit this button, which says create a new account. On the creating a new account, if you do need to create it, if no one has applied to the Community Foundation in the past 3 years, this is really important. This shows the structure of your organization where you put your EIN. If you are fiscally sponsored, you put in all zeros. If you are a program operating of a larger charity, you put all ones. And if you're a church, which we know is not just a church, but the religious designation from the IRS, you put 2s. If you have any questions, also reach out to us. We have access to the IRS databases. And so we can help clarify what you need to put in there. Once you get in, you will see this button that says apply at the top. That is how you apply. The bottom will likely not be blank. If you're just logging into an account, you'll see your historical requests with us. If it's brand new, it will be blank. And then you will see flexible funding, and it will actually say 23. It looks the same as it did last year, and you will click apply. This button in the not total top right corner, but towards the top right, and that will then take you into the application. If you say, Meredith, this is overwhelming, I don't like this system, just know that everyone at the Community Foundation just complained about our internal systems. It is the best that is out there for community foundations. We know it is frustrating. Just shoot a note to grants@communityfoundation.org. We will hop on a Zoom with you. We will screen share with you. We will walk you where you need to click. The literal technical challenges should not be a barrier to applying for this opportunity. Great.
So we're gonna walk through the application. I'm gonna stop sharing for just a moment and then bring up our application.
Can we get another thumbs up that you see what looks like a very similar screen to what you just showed you? Fantastic.
And is it scrolling down when I'm scrolling down now? Okay,
Thanks.
that's wonderful. Really worked out.
Great. So I'm going to show you the first part, which is we talked about at the beginning about how important kind of your stated mission statement is for us to figure out what you do. You can now put your stated mission statement in our system, and you don't have to update it because it shouldn't update because it's in your incorporation documents, whether you're incorporated in Massachusetts or Delaware. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on this little pencil right up here where it says edit organization. It is going to bring up a box that says mission statement. You are going to type or copy and paste your mission statement in there. It should not look like that. You are going to click save. You may get an error message that says cannot talk to the user, something like that. Ignore any error messages. I am super excited to see that it did not pop up because it means our system might be fixing itself. But if you get an error message and you still and you see a mission statement here, that means it's saved for us. If for any subsequent round that you are applying, whether it is flexible funding or any other grant opportunity at the Community Foundation, your mission is saved with us. If you get in here and you're like, Jeff, you said your name was Jeff. I said my name was Meredith. Who is Steve? Right? I have no idea. Oh my gosh, Steve was that like executive director like 10 years ago or something. Don't worry.
Fired.
He's gone. We both did this and we were like, who put in Steve? Just shoot a note to grants. You cannot change the primary contact information. That is the same thing as a previous colleague who has access to the account. We will change it and get it in there. You can go ahead and start working on the application, but we want to make sure that we have the right contact information moving forward. That is the person that will find out if you got a grant or not. That's where our communications are. The primary contact does not need to be you. So on any given organization, there are multiple contacts. So you can put those titles as well. So if you are a development staff member, if you are an external grant writer, if you anything like that, you can be in there as well as having your executive director or having anybody else. Some organizations might have board members that are involved in this, but there is one person who has to be named the primary contact. That is the person who gets grant notifications. And then the contact for the grant is the person we will contact if we have questions about the grant application itself. That should be you if you are filling out the application. Yeah.
Okay, and here's your apply. Okay, and so here's our application. We'll have, just take notice of, as Meredith said, your applicant information up top. And as you scroll down, if you have a need to, you can actually save a PDF of the questions at this spot right here. Some folks want to download and take a look at this offline. You're more than welcome to do that. This details the instructions, and it has that self-assessment tool that we went through a bit earlier. Just again, just trying to make sure folks have the understanding that the process is going to be very competitive, and just making sure that you're in a position to make that decision with all the information.
Just a quick note on those deadlines. The deadline is 11:59 on September 10th. That is a Sunday. We will not be providing technical assistance after the previous Friday at 5 p.m. However, we recognize that a lot of people need all the time, up until the last minute to submit the grant. And we know that sometimes it's really hard to be able to do grant writing while you're doing programmatic work during the week. So you can get all of your questions in the previous Friday from 8 to 5. We are always available, but we will not be checking our emails that weekend. And so if you are someone who likes to wait to the last minute and then you have an issue with the actual submission, that is going to be very sad for us. So we encourage you to get things earlier, but we have given a little bit of extra leeway time.
Right. And so in this organization information, there's just a couple boilerplate questions, one about anti-discrimination policy and our grant making policy. We encourage you to take a look at both of those, and the self-assessment tool, noting have you taken a look at that tool to this point. We're going to ask for the physical location of the organization. Again, understanding that some organizations are going to be outside of our catchment area within the 3 counties, but that's okay if you have significant work that happens within the county. We asked if you then entered your mission statement, which is what Meredith walked us through just not a minute ago. And so just please affirm that you have done that. And if you have any questions related to that, send an email to grants@Community Foundation. Here, we want to hear a little bit about your organization and who you are. Thinking about explaining to us as if we were unfamiliar with your work, what you do, what is most important to you and the folks within your organization, who are the people that you serve, is a question that we'll ask as well, which is actually directly below. We want to hear you describe the population you serve to the best of your ability. And then thinking about the folks that you do serve, how do you include them? This is one thing I want to point to as incredibly important in the application process for us, from our perspective, and thinking about the way we think about folks that we want to be in partnership with and we want to fund. We want to make sure that people who are serving people in our community, no matter where they are, who they are, they're including their voices in the process of their policy and programming completions. And so the hope is that organizations are taking that incredibly seriously, thinking about the folks that they serve and how is their voice centered in the work that they're actually doing. Here we ask a little bit about the ethnicity that organizations are serving, and thinking about your organization structure as well.
If you click anything on this box that is not the last option, which is designated as an independent, as you have your own EIN, a 501c3, an additional box will open where you can put in, as Jeff just showed, your financial sponsor, a fiscal sponsor information and all of that. If you choose, if you are your own 501c3, which most organizations applying are, you will not see any of those sections. That is totally normal and what is supposed to have happen.
Yep. So for our purposes here, we'll utilize the radio button saying that you are your own 501c3. Next gets us to this place that Meredith talked to very early on in the presentation related to the focus areas. And what we really want to encourage folks to do, I think we did some learning with this last year and allowed folks to kind of pull multiple choices and thinking about the programmatic work that an organization does, but we really want to be like pretty clear about what an organization's goals are and what is the organizational mission. And so there, we would like you to affirm that you are either in one of these four positions, and if not, you are outside of the focus area. Again, something Meredith alluded to is like geographic demographics and who you are serving and where you are serving folks in Hamden, Hampshire, and Franklin County. And here we're asking for a percentage of the work that you do. And so if you're an organization that works fully in Hampshire County, feel free to affirm that 100% of the work is happening in the Hampshire County area. If it's split amongst that, give us your best guess as to where a lot of your work is happening. I would like to add, for organizations that are outside of the 3-county area, this is the amount of work as an organization that is happening in these particular counties, right? So if you're an organization that's in Boston based, but you have a program that happens in Hampshire County, just because that program is only happening in Hampshire County, do not put 100%. If 70% of your work is happening in Boston or the Boston area, and 30% of that work is happening in the Hampshire County area, please affirm that that is 30%.
Right, and you'll see, nope, we don't want to be a church. I mean, we could be, but we're 501c3 today. If you put anything in the other category, you should get a box that will pop up. Let's see. And it gives you other counties that you serve. You can also share there, while 70% of our work is in the Boston area, 100% of our work that is in Western Massachusetts is in Hampshire County. You can give numbers. This doesn't just need to other counties. You can use this box to give details about that geographic service area if that helps us better understand you.
Yeah, and it just gives us an opportunity to not have to hunt that information down. And I think We had some confusion on this and within the application last year, but I think we're being pretty specific and explicit about it right now. And it just saves us time from kind of fishing or sending emails back and forth to kind of fully understand what's happening.
Great. So then the next question is about board governance. Previously, we asked about the structure of that. It's super cool. We don't have a preference about your board terms and the number of board members. We hope you figured out what works for you. So we have switched up that question. So now it's asking how your board is representative of the population your organization serves. So again, to this idea that how you're centering voices, boards are, at the end of the day, have fiduciary responsibility, have a lot of responsibility in the direction of an organization. So we'd like to hear how your board is representative. And then a second, it's a two-part question, but we separated out for you, which is what strategies that you use that your board is representative of the population you serve. So that might include some strategies about board recruitment, about the way that board is connected to the population that you serve, about structures. So again, those two questions are deeply connected to each other, and you might find yourself trying to decide which one goes in which. As long as they're both in those boxes, we will read them together. But it's really, how is the board also doing that work of centering the voices and centering community members in your work?
I just wanted to add that I can't express how important that question is in thinking about the representation of your board, but also that it's something that we think about very intently, and it's a place that we pull information from, thinking about the capacity building opportunities that we can deliver as an organization, not only to funded organizations, but organizations that are not funded for this particular grant making mechanism. It's a really, really robust place to think about what are organizations that are doing things in the way where they're centering the voice and bringing in folks who are connected to the work that they're doing, and how can we utilize those strategies and grow those strategies and impart them to other organizations who are looking to do that same exact work. So this is an incredibly important piece for us, not only because of the application and what it means, what the ramifications are for that, but what the learning could be for our community in Mass.
Absolutely. So next on board makeup, we're going to ask how many people currently serve on your board, and how many of those people identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. We recognize that historically organizations that are led by people who identify as BIPOC are not funded as much as organizations that are white-led. There's a lot of research and statistics that shows that. We used to ask this as a percentage question in previous years. We're now asking this as numbers because it's important to know if that is a few people on a small board, if that is few people on a larger board. We recognize that the demographic, that racial identity across this region looks very different for our towns about what percentages look like. We are not looking for all organizations to be the highest. That's why we're asking questions about the population you serve. That's why we're asking questions about your board. This is just another factor. And we realized that it gives us more nuance to understand how many people are on your board and to understand those numbers. We do also ask if your CEO, executive director, or the equivalent position also identifies this way. And we're also looking for staff. All of this has to deal with, again, centering representation of the population. We'll get into this and you'll see this on our on the website. We do have a preference, organizations who have boards and executive directors, CEOs that identify as BIPOC do have a preference in our grant process because of that historic disparity. We also do look for organizations where the leadership represents what the population they are serving looks like. And so that factors in things in addition to race. And so that is where in your population served, in your board strategy, in other places, there's an open-ended question at the bottom. We want to hear that. So we recognize that. We are pretty well versed in what various demographics look like in this community. We're always happy to learn more as well. But we want to name that preference and that organizations have. And we also do recognize that that's going to look different Particularly, we hear this a lot in Franklin County, and we recognize what the demographics look like. So that's why we also want to know, how does your board center the voices of your population, not just how do they identify?
So here we get into our grant request. In this box here, flexible, the funding opportunity name, you just write flexible funding 2023.
It's not a trick question. Just help us out. Our system's not good.
Yeah, this makes it really easy if you just answer it the way it's supposed to be here. I've seen many that have, the organization name or the project.
Or the quotation marks. Don't put the quotation
Quotation
marks.
marks.
Just put flexible funding 2023.
Flexible funding 2023, we'll do it. We are excited. And so the requested amount, so these grants are up to $30,000 to be spent over the calendar year of 2024. If you're an organization that does not feel, some of our smaller organizations and arts organizations specifically, $30,000 might be too much for an organization to receive. So you're more than welcome to adjust that number under, but the highest grant award we will give in this flexible funding cycle is $30,000.
Organizations that apply for less are not better positioned to receive funding just because you're asking for less money. You should ask for what you need.
Yes, please do. So in the next one, we get into kind of the meat of the application where we think about organizational plans and looking at what the goals of your organization are. We have altered the way this looks a little bit this year. What we're looking at, what are the primary goals of your organization? And the reason that we want to know not programmatic goals or not what this specific plan for this this time period is, and thinking about overarching goals for the organization is because in a space where we're doing general operating grants, we really want to be in relationship with organizations based on mission and values and their goals. And so if the goals aren't aligned, I mean, I think Meredith said this earlier, and you need to pay your gas bill as a part of the, or you need to repair something in your facilities. That is a part of upholding the goals of your organization, because if you don't have those things, then you can't achieve the goals that you've set forth. So we're really looking at what are the overarching goals of the organization. So here you can input those. And then we want you to think about the challenges and opportunities related to that goal. What are the things that you foresee it might be inhibitors to achieving those goals? And then what are the opportunities that may come from the goals that you've set forth as an organization?
Or things that are going to make your goal more achievable that might be uniquely happening.
Also, we want to think about the impact of the particular goals. And so how will you measure impact in both quantitative and qualitative ways? And how will, another question that could be answered here is, how will folks be better off? How will the folks that you serve be better off?
We're trying to see that impact tie back to the goal. So if your goal is to think about launching a grassroots fundraising campaign, and the opportunity is that you have some new board members that have previously run programs before, the challenge is you may not have the technology, then the impact is not students are going to read at a 20% higher rate if you're a youth program service. It's going to be that your fundraising goals has exceeded by X%. So we're really looking at the end of the day, how do you help figure out if a general operating support grant is strong? Can organizations make a goal and reach a goal? And if they can't, can they understand what's getting in the way, try to work through it or pivot? So it's really important that the impact and the goal are tied together so that we can get a sense, this organization is going to know if they're getting to the place that they want to get to. If you want to share about the goals that you have, about how, again, how people are better off, then your goals should be about how you're going to help people be better off. We give an opportunity for 3 different goals and 3 different impacts, so you can tie those together. But I think that's really important to really say that we see that as a continuum, goal and impact.
Yeah, and so to Meredith's point, the hope is that you have more than one goal for your organization for the year, but only required the goal, the opportunities and challenges and the impact of one. But if you do have more goals, feel free to click this button here. Yes, and it'll bring up the same type of setting for the next goal.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll click it so you can see it. And the reason that we did this, I think Meredith just alluded to, there was a lot of conflation with goals connected to the impacts. And we figured if we laid it out one by one, folks could go through on an individual basis and think about with intention about the goals, the challenges, and the potential impacts of the goals.
If you are an organization that is in our Strong Start for Children sector, how we look at that at mission is that we understand that there are some really large agencies in our area that run preschools and daycare programs that are the same size as organizations that just run that. So you will get one additional question. We'll ask for your organizational goals. And then if you're in the early childhood sector, we'll ask for your goals around the early child. So if you're a YMCA or Boys and Girls Club that runs that preschool, your goal might be a capital campaign. It might be to increase membership levels. We'll just ask for a basic of those overall organizational goals. And then we're going to really want to understand, well, we're focusing on preschool mental health. We're focusing on professional development with teachers. We've just seen enough examples where sometimes the organizational goals didn't help us understand what the impact would be in the early childhood sector. You will not see that unless that is the option that you choose and that is what your mission is. And again, if there are any questions about that, just shoot at Grants. We're happy to continue to clarify.
The next piece of this is organization financials. So it's pretty straightforward. We ask for the fiscal year end date for your organization, whether you run on a state fiscal year or a calendar fiscal year or a federal fiscal year. Just let us know what that is. We ask for an organization operating budget for the current year for your budget for your organization. And then we want to know what the full-time equivalents. So if you have, 4 part-time employees and they work 0.5 hours, that's 2 full-time equivalents is the way that we're looking at it. I think that's pretty clear. Yeah.
There's a comment section here. A couple of our, we've had music groups say, well, we're a staff of 2, but we have a symphony of 100. For us, that's like an FTE of 2, but you can let us know in the comment section that you have the number of people you probably are paying them as vendors. So that can just give us, we're trying to look at the size of the budget, the number of people that are working there. It gives us clarity on that. The next is we ask you to upload your operating budget. I want to be clear that a budget for us includes expenses and revenues. It is very important for us to see not only what you're spending, but what you anticipate bringing in. That might look like a P&L or a revenue expense report, or that might just simply look like a budget. But we are asking for 2 years. So in whatever fiscal year you are currently in right now, go back 1 fiscal year. We do not need to see audited financials. Will accounting come get me? I can see your 990s. Well, we all can. Your budget, generally speaking, is much more helpful than audited financials where we're going through 30 pages, really trying to figure out how you're spending your money. If you need a template, let us know, but it should be in a template that you use on a regular basis. You do not need to recreate anything for us. And if it is easier to put those 2 years in separate documents, we have the ability where you can upload 2 files. If you already have it, last year, year to date, last year, and then year to date, you can also send 1 file. This should not be challenging on you. And yet we know that last year we had to reach out to about 40% of our organizations and ask for some budget follow-up information. So we know that this is challenging. We hope it isn't, but we know it is. So please go ahead and ask us questions. Whatever format you have is generally okay. And if we feel like we don't have enough information, we will reach back out to you. This is the benefit of submitting, if you can, a little bit before the deadline. So we're then not crunching right around the deadline to try to get more budget information from you.
And the last piece of this is, I think that's the last.
Yeah.
Yeah. So closing comments, which I actually find are incredibly important. One, because you can provide context that you weren't able to find a space for in the application itself. We found places within the last application round that informed the way the application looked going forward. And so it's a really important place to find new information that can inform the way that our application process looks and the way that we're able to interact with nonprofits.
Yeah. After that, we have a new section for us, which is additional materials. Please do not create anything for us. We do not want fancy presentations at all. But if you have an annual report, if you have a grant report that you've given to another funder, if you have evaluation information, this really should be pre-existing. But if there's some kind of document that gives some context that you've already created for another reason, we're happy to look at something that helps us give that context. We then ask about capacity building opportunities. Again, we've expanded this list a little bit based on what we've heard from you. We use this feedback very much from all of the applicants, funded and not funded, to create more capacity building opportunities for the field. So this is really helpful. And at the very bottom, you will get, once you submit it, this is a note that in the email confirmation you get, there is a survey. It is an 8-question survey. It should not take more than 2 or 3 minutes to give us feedback on the grant application. It is totally anonymous. You can tell us this question was really hard. This application took way too long. You can tell us it was really helpful. You know, this particular staff member walked us through it and it was helpful or it wasn't helpful. Again, we use that information to change this and future applications. And so we greatly appreciate your time if you can make the time to give us that feedback. Again, there's it is totally anonymous. I can attest, I have no idea who fills it out, but it did, we review that, and that is the first thing that we generally start with when creating a new application is what have nonprofits previously said and how do we make it as easy as possible while we still get enough information to make decisions.
And just want to draw attention to the bottom of the application where you can save. Again, you have more than a month to fill out the application up until September 10th. And so you can save the application and go in and out of it as you want, and then please submit one.
Yeah, and I think one final thing that I'm gonna let Margaret explain how to do this. Actually, maybe I'm gonna see here. Margaret, is there a way that people can collaborate? Like if I want to work on this, here, boom, collaborate right there. If I want to work on this with my coworker, like let's say I start working on this and I'm like, I need Jeff's help because I don't know anything about the budget. I can click collaborate and I can send it to Jeff. It will help him create an account if he doesn't have one or if he already has one. And then 2 people can be editing the document. Can make those changes. And so you do not need to work it on this alone. You do not need to give your colleague your login either to the system. You can just click this button, collaborate here, and it will email to them. If you need, let's say you just need to send this to someone else in your agency so that they can view it. Let's say you worked on it and you're not the person who can hit submit. You have a couple different options here. So please feel free to use that. And again, if you have any issues, just let us know.
And that's the application. So I'm going to stop sharing here and go back to our presentation just for a moment, and then we'll open up for questions. I think Nicole has been furiously
I just didn't get to the last one.
furiously answering questions in the chat, and we want to say thank you to Nicole. So I'm going to share this one. Okay.
Just remember on these deadlines, right? That is Sunday, September 10th. We will let you know just after Thanksgiving. We're not gonna do it before Thanksgiving, probably unless we're really moving ahead. But there'll be pretty clear communication about this, and funds will be available to you for the beginning of 2024. We are going to have more times that you can connect with us. We're going to be out in the community, and next week we'll be both up in Greenfield at Green Space. We'll also be here in our office. If you got all your questions answered, you do not need to come to say hi to us. You also can come say hi to us. But some people, it is easier to sit in person. We recognize that. We will do another info session on the 31st. It will cover the exact same information. But if you have colleagues, if you feel like you don't want to go back and watch a recording, you'd rather hear it again. And then the entire week before it is due, with the exception of Labor Day, because most of us here are off, we will be sitting in a Zoom room and you can bring your individual questions. We will be doing that from 10 to 2. Also, if you reach out to grants@communityfoundation.org, if these times don't work, if you have a more pressing question, we'll get back to you right away and figure out how to get answers to your questions.
Question. We're going to stop sharing so we can see the people. So I would encourage folks maybe to raise hands and then come off mute if you have any questions, or if you've answered your question and Nicole's, okay.
Yeah.
What is it?
Second.
Second to last question. I'm gonna go into the chat.
So just to clarify, we do give out $15 million. Last year we gave out $15 million in grants. That is not just our process. That includes donor advised funds here as well. I'm not sure that it's just 6 million in our 3 counties. I can clarify that. But for this process, which these are foundation directed resources, we are limited to the 3 counties. Donor advised funds and other funds here have a little bit more flexibility. For this round, we have about no less than $2 million that will be available for this at $30,000 as the maximum size of grant. That is 66 grants. We might have a little bit more money. I do not anticipate this being a $3 million grant round. I think it could go to 2.1 or 2.2. We're looking at all available resources.
Nancy.
Hi there. So I just want to hone in for a moment on the priorities, because when, like, so a strong start for all children, for example, you mentioned like a number of different things that you're going to be able to provide early childhood education and care as a part of your mission. You also mentioned professional development for early childhood educators and parenting knowledge and skills. So for that priority, are you saying that you want an organization that is providing early education and care directly as a preschool program, early education program? Or are you saying that your mission can be involved in any of those 3 areas? So, for example, we're very much focused on parenting and parent education. We do provide early education and care programs, but not in the Pioneer Valley. So in the Pioneer Valley, in the 3 counties that we're talking about now, we are very much providing parenting education, parenting support. We're also providing, like, our mission is to offer the post-secondary education in connection to skills and training. But we're not a vocational school. So can you answer that question? Is that a direct enough question?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, yes. So organizations that are doing parent education work, who, in theory are working to think about, I think what we've attempted to do in the last year is broaden what that might look like. In early education and care, obviously, it's really important that we are providing resources to our early education centers and schools. But a lot of that care starts at home, right? And so building a community of parents who are informed about parenting and understanding, educating their children at home and how they can be most effective in directing, as they are the most effective in directing the lives of their children, is really important to us.
Yeah, so it can be direct care, family education, professional development, or there might be other things in the early childhood strong start that we didn't list. The key for that is it's really focused on families with children under the 5 and under, so before someone hits school age.
Okay, is there no problem, Marianne. There was a person named Giancarlo who had their hand up, but I think their hand went down, so I want to acknowledge them if they want the space to ask the question. Maybe not, and so that's fine. Marianne?
Hey, I think one of my questions was, how do you define early education? So it sounds like you just defined it as essentially 5 and younger. I think I know the answer to this other one, but I am a board member of Translate Gender, which has programs that serve trans youth and their families, as well as some folks that are kind of transition age, 18 to 22. But some of those are under 5. Some of the youth that we serve, but I guess I wouldn't I don't know, I guess I shouldn't, that we wouldn't be considered for something like that because only some of our in that category out of your 4 priorities, because not all of our youth are under 5, right? It's just a portion of it.
I would say the difference for youth serving organizations and in the education sector broadly is that if you're exclusively focused on early childhood or you run a preschool, which again, we know sometimes that is not, that is part of another agency. And the true is on the post-secondary side, if your exclusive focus really is on that post-secondary entering the workforce area, then we're going to see that inside the focus areas. There are organizations that we know that are cradle to college. And generally speaking, we see that mission outside of our focus area, but we recognize that you have programs that are going to overlap on kind of those bookends of childhood. But we would say that your mission would not be within that area. You would have program services, and that's important to let us know if that's a goal of yours.
You mean if it's our goal to help serve them better, to expand that part of our
So for
organization?
example, if your goal next year is to really focus on parenting programs for preschoolers, and if that's a genuine goal of the entire organization, that's great to share with us. If not, in the population you serve, you might want to talk about We Serve All Youth. That includes families with children kind of in this age group.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I did see a question that came directly into our chat about volunteers versus staff. We know that some of your organizations rely heavily on volunteers. We think that's great. That's something that you should be able to share with us you can add into your board section. We know that not every volunteer is on a board member, but when we're asking for questions around staff and FTE, we're really looking for paid staff. It's important for us to know if organizations don't have paid staff and are carrying out their work versus those organizations that are.
Any other questions? Well then. So I guess I want to say I appreciate any and everyone who showed up today. And if you have any questions beyond or didn't want to kind of do that in front of a group of 50 people that you don't know, I totally understand that as well. So you can reach out to us directly at grants at, check the chat. Nicole's told me to check the chat.
Right, we'll continue to check the chat. We'll stay on for another minute or two, and so we can do that. But for people, we always want to be respectful of your time. We said we'd end at 3.
Yeah.
Grants@communityfoundation.org. And again, there's a good odds directly you'll hear from myself or Margaret, but there's a really high odds that you'll also be sent. Those emails will go to Jeff. They might go to Nicole. So you'll hear back from one of us. And again, we will have these set drop-in times. That helps us just because if you have a question, we think someone else has the question too, but we also do recognize their individual questions.
I think Liz asked a question about DEI efforts and racial justice, and I just wanted to affirm that while that's incredibly important and a part of the organization's or community foundation strategic vision and focus areas is DEI and how important that is as it shows up in our workplaces and institutions. The specific nature of the funding for flexible funding is connected to racial justice. So organizations that are doing work in addressing systemic and structural racism. And so that is what we mean when we talk about that specific focus area.
We've heard loud and clear the need for more and more nuanced training in that realm. And that's something we're working on capacity building. We've definitely heard from a lot of folks, and we're trying to think about more options in addition to making referrals to some amazing programs that exist in our region and just outside of our region. This presentation will go up on the website as soon as our amazing communication staff can take it off of the cloud and put it on. We anticipate it will be there by Friday at the latest. We'll continue to send out emails almost weekly throughout the entirety of the application process. And we're also just really excited to share, we as a staff just got an overview today that we're going to be updating our email preferences, and it's going to make it easier for anyone in your organization to sign up directly themselves for any of our emails, which we know has been a real challenge previously. You've kind of sent a note to us, but individuals can't manage that. So anybody else on your staff that needs to be receiving our emails, I think we anticipate in the next few weeks, we will have a a new system that will make it helpful. But if you feel like someone in your organization isn't currently receiving emails and should be receiving them directly about this opportunity, you can also contact grants. Yeah, so this was a question just about training around issues that are beyond racial justice. So for this particular round, again, our focus for the 75% of funds is looking at racial justice. We can share more about our thought process and our philosophy on why we have started there. And again, that still means, and we know that how important it is, and we know that there are a lot of marginalized groups in our community. But for this particular round, it just means you don't get a preference for the funds. It means you will still be evaluated with the same kind of criteria that we're looking at, but we will move organizations whose mission are in those 4 areas, look at them with a priority. And again, it happened last year that 75% of the organizations that we funded were in those areas with very almost naturally, organically, as we looked at the applications. And so we anticipate, well, let me say, it'll be interesting to see if that happens again this year.
Yeah, so I don't think there's any more
Great.
comments or questions. Again, please feel free to reach out if you need to. Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.